Hello, everyone. Welcome back. You're watching Better for America, sponsored by AMAC. I'm thrilled to have with me Tim Stewart. Tim Stewart is the CEO of the U.S. Oil and Gas Association. Tim, great to have you here with me today.
It's great to be with you. This is always a great event, isn't it?
I love CPAC. It really is a great event. We've got so many amazing people that have been coming by the booth, and you can feel that people are really excited about 2024 and the hope that the future brings. This is a time for change.
Absolutely. From the oil and gas industry's perspective, we need a change, desperately need a change, to be honest with you. We've been living through probably the most difficult regulatory environment the industry's ever had in my 30 years, certainly, but ever probably. So we're hopeful for a change coming forward in 2024. We'd like to get back to normal, which was the prior administration, to be honest with you.
Well, that's just it. Our members are real smart. They recognize that under Donald Trump, that America was energy independent and it was looking good. People say we have gold right underneath our feet. And people scratch their heads. It makes no sense that we have a president today who does not want to really get us back to where or improve things, and Americans are paying for it.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
impacting everyday Americans. And I want to talk a little bit about how energy impacts really poverty across the globe and how important it is. Speak to that a little bit if you could, and why it is so important that countries really recognize
Yeah,
what needs to be
the
done.
United States is the world's only energy superpower. We are number one in oil and gas production. We're number two in renewables and nuclear. We have everything. We really are the superpower. And ironically, over the last 3 years, there's a new term that has emerged called energy poverty, which is that Americans, the land of abundance, the land of plenty, somehow there are people who can't afford energy for whatever reason. And that is because primarily the administration has taken 175 to 200 individual actions designed to reduce the amount of oil and gas that is produced in the United States and reduce its consumption. And so that's everything from the Keystone XL pipeline to gas stove regulations and EV mandates and everything in between. And what that has done is that has caused prices and scarcity to begin to impact moderate and low income families unlike any other time in our history. Uh, it is sad that we're living in a period where there's so much energy and yet so much energy poverty, and that is self-induced. The administration has intentionally created energy scarcity with an intent to force people to switch the type of fuel they use, and the result of that is we're all a lot poorer because of it, and it shouldn't be this way.
Now, the reason they say that they're forcing change, this kind of change, which is really bad for Americans, is all in the name of climate change.
Right.
Can you speak a little bit to that? Because we understand that, can't believe everything you read, and we've got to understand the truth. How much truth is tied to that claim that, we've got to go electric vehicle all around in order to save the climate?
So to save the climate, you have to have more of all of the above. That is the bottom line. The United States, we lead the world in emissions and global in CO2. In the reduction of CO2 emissions. That is because we have replaced a number of our coal plants with natural gas. Natural gas, ironically, not renewables, is responsible for our dramatic reduction in CO2 emissions. We need more of that. But we also need reliability, which means at some point you're going to need coal and nuclear and natural gas to provide the power when the wind and the sun aren't doing their job. You cannot have an energy system that is dependent upon the weather. But that's where they're pushing in the name of climate change. For them, it is not just policy. It's a religious dogma at this point. I think we're all coming around to that this is a religion to them. And as I mentioned earlier, for us to adopt their religion, we have to accept and take a leap of faith. And a lot of us aren't ready for that just yet. But the reality is those who control the purse strings, those who control the policy, are forcing us to accept a religion that a lot of us are not yet converted to.
And that's exactly what it is. It seems like a real ideology that's infesting all areas, all facets of our country. I have a couple of questions from AMAC members, many of them listening today. They're asking, what are some of the most pressing adjustments that are needed to fix the issues within the energy sector right here at home?
So our problem is we are continually over-regulated. The reality is it makes good sense for us to be strong environmental stewards. We have to be able to portray that to our consumers. We've got to be able to portray that to our investors that we're doing the right thing. And yet the government now is in this process of regulating the regulations upon the regulations. And so we're 3 and 4 levels deep in the regulation that accomplishes the same thing. That is our biggest problem. Uh, those were the good old days of the Trump administration and the Bush administration prior. There was this attempt to go into the tapestry of regulations, state and federal, everything, and start to pull out the ones that don't really matter or that are duplicative. If I were to go do an oil and gas project in Utah or Colorado today, I have to comply with 127 different federal and state regulations just to get started.
Wow.
That's how closely regulated we are. That's why we are so clean at what we do. And yet it makes no sense to take 127 regulations and add another 34 on top of that or 175 on top of that. It doesn't make sense to do that.
Certainly doesn't. And I think most people see that for what it is. Another question from the AMAC member, Mary. She says, in light of the Biden administration's focus on environmental regulations, how do you see these regulations shaping the future of oil and gas exploration and production? And can they be undone with a
Yeah.
with a conservative leader?
That is a great question. I'm really glad she asked that. It's important to know that the president only controls about 20% of the overall federal oil and gas assets in the United States. That's the federal lands and waters. But when you essentially shut off all access or future access to that, the capital investment has to go somewhere else. But at the same time you're shutting that off, you're essentially cutting off 20% of your potential revenues. And why would any business do that? That makes no sense at all. If you were a CEO and came in and said, you know what, I'm gonna force a mandate that we lose 20% of our future revenues going forward and reelect me or reappoint me, nobody would do that. And yet that's what the Biden administration has done. For us to get back to where we were, we're not asking for free reign. We're just asking to let us follow the existing regulations, and we will do that, and we can produce energy off of the federal lands.
Very good. Now, globally, how should American energy industry respond to this global push? Because we do see this global push, and coming from many countries that are very dirty,
Yeah.
and not really they're not nearly as regulated as we are. How should we be positioning
That
ourselves?
is an excellent point too. The oil and gas that's produced in the United States is done in the most clean environmental way in the world. We're the world's leader. This is how it is.
Yes.
So if you're going to use oil and gas, you want it produced here because it's so clean, environmentally responsive. Petroleum has always been a global commodity. It's easy to move around, and it is everywhere. The interesting that's happened is natural gas was never a global commodity until just about 15 or 20 years ago when the United States learned how to export LNG, and we were able to tap into that world market. We now offer stability and we now offer reliability to our allies across the world. A good example is LNG, and our agreement with, say, Japan, for example. We're on one hand, we're saying to the Japanese, help us be a counterweight to the Chinese expansion, and we'll support you economically. But if you go 2 weeks later, the administration says, and by the way, the LNG that we promised you, we're not going to permit that anymore. Japan says, well, wait a minute, that was our agreement, so we have to go somewhere else. We'll go to the Middle East to get it. We'll go somewhere else, and that natural gas isn't produced in a clean way like we do it. It's now a global commodity, and so the United States as a swing producer plays a very pivotal role in global stability in the energy market.
Really good stuff. Tim, tell us a little bit about the association, the U.S. Oil and Gas Association, and the impact that that's having.
Well, I hope we're having an impact, uh, but my association is made up primarily of the smaller privately held oil and gas companies, the family companies. We're small businesses, but we also produce an awful lot of energy. Some of our companies that you would never heard of will find themselves ranked in the top 5 or top 10 of U.S. oil producers. Odds are, if there's a name on an engineering building somewhere on a university in Texas, it's probably one of my members or their grandfathers who've been there. We punch well above our weight class in terms of production and advocacy. So my board has been really good to me. Say, look, you need to say what needs to be said, and I'm trying to do that. So it's great to talk to you about things like that.
We so appreciate you joining us here. Tell me what you've got planned for CPAC. Will you be speaking at any of the events here?
We covered a panel this afternoon, and
Fabulous.
it was great. So I'm going to wander around here and soak it all in. It's a pretty neat environment here. So
It sure is. Tim, thank you again for being here with us today and keep up the great work that you're doing. God bless you.
great to be with you. Thank you.